We are blessed today with getting him here to talk to us about history, historical truths, philosophy, not so much math, unless you want to put some in. I really love math. And
I don't want to lose the audience.
And Charles, I will move this microphone over towards you.
Is this good?
Or you can hold it if you want.
No, I want to hold. Okay. Is this good? Okay. Okay, so our topic today is the rise of American fascism. I'm not talking about the last few months. I'm talking about the years between World War I and World War II. At that time, there was a network of more than 150 national organizations campaigning to undermine democratic institutions. While Germany's Nazi enforcers were known as the black shirts, and fascist Italy had the brown shirts, the United States had the silver shirts, with thousands of members and a headquarters in the principal cities of every state. The ideology of this well-armed militia revolved around anti-Semitism and anti-communism. They believed that all Jews were communists and all communists were Jews, and that these forces were responsible for all the world's problems and all of Europe's wars. The promotion of anti-Semitism was a common element throughout this movement, which included, for example, the German-American Bund, which filled Madison Square Garden for its pro-Nazi rallies, the American Nationalist Party, which was planning a mass hanging of prominent Jews, the Christian Front, which included hundreds of New York City police and National Guard members, the American Nationalist Confederation, which adopted as its symbols the Nazi swastika, the Hitler Youth, which ran summer sleepaway camps, including a large one on Long Island, where the interior streets and paths were named for prominent Nazis. The Friends of Germany, which trained its own army to save America from the communist Jews, and the Ku Klux Klan, which then had approximately 30,000 members. There were dozens more, many of them well-armed. The 1940 raid on the Christian Front, for example, turned up military-grade rifles, pistols, shotguns, ammunition, machine guns, bombs, and other explosives. This movement stole weapons from armories and manufactured its own bombs. It trained for mass murder and violent insurrection. One plan was to trigger hundreds of simultaneous armed attacks on government targets if FDR was reelected in 1940, followed by the overthrow of the government and establishment of a fascist dictatorship. The The nation's leading industrialist, Henry Ford, was perhaps its loudest anti-Semite. He even bought a weekly newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, just for that purpose, and included a free subscription with every Model T that they sold. The paper was a money loser, but Ford hadn't bought it as an investment. He bought it to spread his hateful ideas, myths, and lies. Among these was a series of essays that was later published as a 4-volume collection titled The International Jew. Ford deliberately chose not to copyright this publication in hopes that it would be widely reprinted, which it was. It's still in print today. Among other prominent leaders and supporters of this movement were several senators and a couple of dozen congressmen, including Representative Hamilton Fish of Dutchess County. Fish was the ranking Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, as well as chairman of the National Committee to Keep America Out of Foreign Wars. Keeping the United States out of World War II was a popular position when the war began in Europe. Both party platforms Both parties pledged in their 1940 platforms to keep the U.S. out of, quote, any foreign war. This position was also popular among the Nazis. Hitler knew that Britain and France were unprepared to stop his army's blitz through the continent. He also knew that the United States Armed Forces could pose a formidable enemy. That may have been the primary reason that Germany bankrolled, both secretly and openly, America's fascist isolationist movement. The German National Office also ghost wrote speeches for dozens of senators and congressmen. They, in turn, inserted those speeches into the congressional record so that they could be copied and sent in the hundreds of thousands in the mail to voters at taxpayer expense. The campaign to keep America out of the war was spearheaded by the country's largest and most influential voluntary political organization, the America First Committee, the chief spokesman of which was Charles Lindbergh. Since his 1927 transocean solitary flight, he had likely become the world's most famous American. Riding on his popularity, Lindbergh was invited by several countries to accept aviation honors. And in Germany, he accepted a medal from its Nazi government. Back in America, he told a rally of 40,000 at Chicago's Soldier Field that an agreement with Hitler could, quote, maintain world peace and civilization far into the future. Nevertheless, he was courted to oppose FDR in 1940. Philip Roth wrote a novel about how that might have turned out if Lindbergh actually got the nomination and defeated Roosevelt. Very good books called The Plot Against America. Highly recommended. I read it the week after Donald Trump's first inauguration, and it resonated. Eventually, Lindbergh simultaneously fathered families with 4 German women. More names, some still in memory, some drifted into obscurity. The leading Nazi agent has been pretty much forgotten. His name was George Sylvester Viereck. But you may know of Philip Johnson, a leading architect who was also a Hitler fanboy. He advocated cleansing America of blacks, Irish, Eastern Europeans, and of course, Jews. Huey Long, the super popular Louisiana governor and senator for a couple of years at the same time. He gave the United States a test drive in corrupt populist dictatorship. He traveled with heavily armed bodyguards, delivered 2,500 miles of roads and 40 bridges, all with his name on them. Plus free public school textbooks, night schools, hospitals, and more. Then there were the kickbacks, the kidnappings, the political machine that controlled every statewide elected office. He was assassinated in 1936 by one of his followers. Nobody really understood that. At his funeral, 100,000 people. He was the all-American fascist leader. And his father, Charles Coughlin, anti-Semitic radio priest, whose show was the most popular in America. His audience was about 30 million, 25% of the population of the United States. He regularly accused Franklin Roosevelt of, quote, handing America over to the commies. And there's General George Mosley, who was being primed to become the United States Führer. He campaigned publicly to sterilize Jewish immigrants. Foremost fascist intellectual was Lawrence Dennis, who had a weekly newsletter funded by the Nazis. Meanwhile, the German Library of Information mailed free copies of its weekly news digest to 100,000 influencers, ministers, teachers, priests, editors, and elected officials. Then the American Fellowship Forum, German-funded, which sponsored speaking tours by pro-fascist isolationist Americans. Just during the summer of 1941, the German Foreign Office distributed over 1 million leaflets and postcards in the United States, plus 2.5 million pamphlets and magazines, and 135,000 books. But on December 7th of that year, the world changed, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor and Hitler soon declared war on the United States. Now we were at war. Public opinion flipped. The America First Committee announced support for the war and then dissolved itself. Even Charles Lindbergh offered to enlist. Catholic Church forced Father Coughlin to give up his national radio show. In 1944, the powerful Hamilton Fish, one of the nation's most outspoken isolationists, was voted out of Congress. Nazi agents were arrested and charged with sedition. In the Great Sedition Trial of 1944, which turned into a circus with 17 defendants and 22 defense attorneys, there were no convictions. Still, the Axis was defeated. After the horrors of the concentration camps became public, the ugliest forms of anti-Semitism dropped out of style. Still, I wonder, how would this have ended if Pearl Harbor had not been attacked? Something to think about. Oh, anybody? Yes.
Thank you. That was an enlightening history lesson. We learn from history, and we benefit from it. What's the lesson from this? What's the takeaway?
We have to be on our guard when it comes to demagogues, and want to be dictators. On June 14th, Donald Trump is throwing himself what he always wanted, a military parade. Indivisible is sponsoring and supporting opposing demonstrations. There are already about 700 registered with them, and the list is still growing. The idea being to drown out the noise of the military parade. Mobilize.us is the website where all these are registered. And yeah, I hope we get about 1 million people. Yes.
The statement that you made, excuse me, that resonated with me was Huey Long was voted out of office. And that's another option that we have for standing up, being heard, and going to the polls and making sure that we're careful with our votes. And
I'm sorry, did I mishear? Huey Long wasn't voted out of office before he was assassinated, was he?
Yeah, he was assassinated in 1936. What I mentioned was that Hamilton Fish.
Yeah, Hamilton Fish was the one voted out of office, but not until 1944.
Right.
Right, Hamilton Fish was the one who was voted out, right? Okay.
Hamilton Fish's son, by the way, became the publisher of the Nation, which is the country's leading leftist magazine.
Is that the same Hamilton Fish that I see? I see his name on the Newburgh Beacon Bridge.
No, that was on the Poughkeepsie Highland Bridge, but it was renamed. It's not. I don't think his name is still on it. But he wasn't the only. There was a whole line of Hamilton Fishes. It was a storied political name.
A whole school of Hamilton Fish.
So I'm not sure if the bridge was named after that one or one of his ancestors.
They thought it was a good name, they just kept using it. Okay. Thanks, Charles.
All right, thank you.